Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So I'm going to go my favorite studs for week 8 of the NFL season over on Draftkings. Yes, I know most of these guys are pretty easy to pick and they're very obvious, but we still have to pick our favorite studs each and every single week, and that's all I'm doing in this video. Also, if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out and I really do appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get right into it. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position. And up top, Patrick Mahomes. He's at a massive $8,100 price tag, but this is a dream spot versus the Jets. Now, the only concern I have here with Patrick Mahomes has nothing to do with the matchup, has nothing to do with his talent or any of his weapons. It's just a matter of them being 19-point favorites at home. This game could get out of hand quick, and we saw last week versus Denver. He was pulled from the game early, and he certainly did not hit value given his price tag. But you have to keep in mind that there was 2 defensive touchdowns from the Chiefs that week, meaning that was 2 missed opportunities for Patrick Mahomes to potentially score touchdowns. So assuming the defense doesn't go off once again, I still think the Kansas City Chiefs defense will probably have a pretty good day versus the Jets. I still don't think they're going to score 2 touchdowns here, and Patrick Mahomes should have a pretty solid day, because if they do blow out the Jets, which they probably will, it's probably because Patrick Mahomes had a pretty strong day, more than likely throwing over 300 yards and maybe getting 3, 4, 5 touchdowns. So I like Patrick Mahomes quite a bit here. This is obviously a very soft matchup versus the New York Jets. They are currently 20th in the league DVOA-wise versus the pass, only allowing 20.8 DraftKings points per game to the position, which is mid-pack, but it's Patrick Mahomes. We're talking about the best quarterback in football. He's got elite weapons in Tyreek Hill and Travis KELCE, and then you have the 2 good running backs in Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell now. So I don't see how the Jets are going to be able to stop this offense. I'm hoping maybe the Chiefs defense gives up some points to at least make it not close, but at least maybe where they're not going to take Patrick Mahomes out and they're still going to let him sling the rock around a little bit later in the game. So given all that aside, Patrick Mahomes should have a really strong game here versus the Jets, although he's at a very high price point. I'm probably only getting there in tournaments because that's going to make me sacrifice a high-end running back. But $8,100, if you're going to pair him up with Tyreek Hill and Travis KELCE, super expensive, but it's a stack that can put up a ton of points this week. You're just going to have to find some value elsewhere. And the second quarterback I want to talk about is Aaron Rodgers, who's having an excellent season this year. He's coming off a very strong game versus the Houston Texans, and I love this game a lot for fantasy purposes. We have a 54-point over-under, and the Packers have a team total above 30, which sounds great. Compared to the Chiefs, though, the Chiefs are almost at nearly 34 points this week, which is absolutely insane, but I expect this game to be a bit closer. It's only a 6.5-point spread here in Green Bay's favor, and I think this is one of the better games to stack. Now, the problem with stacking this game up is that most of these options are pretty expensive. Aaron Rodgers is pricey, Aaron Jones is pricey, Davante Adams is pricey. Then on the flip side, Kirk Cousins isn't really that expensive, but Adam Thielen's a lot of money, and so is Dalvin Cook as well. And hint, you're going to see quite a few of those guys on this list, but I think this is a great game for fantasy purposes. Early on in the season, this game did shoot out and was great for DFS purposes, and I think we could see something similar again. Both these defenses aren't that great, especially Minnesota. They have struggled versus the pass and versus the run so far this season. And Rodgers, he's averaging nearly 300 passing yards per game, nearly 3 passing touchdowns per game so far this season with 8 yards per attempt. Now, if you're looking at Minnesota's numbers this year, they are 15th DVA versus the pass, which is a little bit better than they are versus the run. But they're still allowing 24.4 DraftKings points per game to the position, which is 27th in the league. And they're allowing nearly 300 passing yards per game as well, with over 2 passing touchdowns. So Aaron Rodgers, like him quite a bit. He and Davante Adams are an excellent pairing this week, but that costs a ton of money. So you're probably only getting there in tournaments. Although if you want to make Davante Adams the cornerstone of your lineup, I have no issues with that, but you just know you're going to be sacrificing a high-end running back, which I typically shy away from, especially in cash games. But in tournaments, I am all for the game stack here, and they should have a very strong game versus a pretty poor Minnesota pass defense. And now we'll move on to the running back position with King Henry at a pretty pricey $8,000. I wish he was a little bit less expensive, especially because he's not that involved in the passing game. Although we'll see a couple of times a game he catches a screen, and actually when he played Houston a couple of weeks ago, he turned one of those into around a 50-yard reception, which was absolutely awesome. You can't expect that each and every single week from him, but he's going to get a boatload of carries on the ground, and I love this game for DFS purposes. It actually has a high over-under than the Packers and Vikings game. This one's at 54.5, and not the Vikings, I'm sorry. The Titans have a team total above 30 this week, and they're also 6-point favorites versus Cincinnati, who we know does not have the greatest defense in the world. They just kind of got lit up by Baker Mayfield last week, and Kareem Hunt also had a very good game as well. But the volume is something that I love with Derrick Henry. You know he's going to get around 25 to 30 touches each and every single game. Most of those coming on the ground, but he is just so good at a runner. It's so hard to tackle him. And as the season goes on, he gets harder to tackle as his numbers always seem to get better as the season progresses, and we're almost at the halfway point. Actually, we're kind of kind of right there at the halfway point heading into week 8. But his numbers on the season are excellent, over 110 rushing yards per game right now, 24 rushing attempts, over a rushing touchdown, 4.6 yards per carry, and overall some very strong numbers. In the matchup versus Cincy, they're only allowing the 12th fewest points per game to running backs, but they're also 21st DVA versus the run and giving up over 110 rushing yards per game. They just haven't really given up many rushing touchdowns, but we know Derrick Henry can get into the end zone multiple times per game, and he's a slim threat in the passing game, but he certainly has the ability to take a screen, and make a big play with it. We've seen it a few times in his career. So Derrick Henry, he is pretty pricey, but I love this spot versus Cincinnati. I think they're going to have a very difficult time trying to tackle him all game long. And the next running back we have here is Dalvin Cook at $7,300. And I got to be honest, it was very hard picking between Aaron Jones or Dalvin Cook. But since I had so many Green Bay Packers already listed in here, I decided to go with Dalvin Cook, although I do have another one listed in a little bit. But I decided to go with Cook here because this is a great matchup versus Green Bay. It's a good matchup for Aaron Jones as well, but Green Bay has actually been the worst team in terms of points given up to the position this year when it comes to the running back position. So I went with Dalvin Cook here, and I'm assuming he's going to be good to go. The injury isn't believed to be too serious, and he had that bye week to get some rest as well. So I'm assuming he's coming into this game nearly at 100%. And if that's the case, I love him here at $7,500. Sorry, I just realized he was $7,300 on the screen. I was thinking about Aaron Jones when I made that. $7,500. Sorry about that. Only a $200 difference. But I love this game for DFS purposes. Like I just previously mentioned, they have a team total. They have an over-under of 54 in this game, and they have a 23.75 implied team total. He's also going to be involved as a pass catcher as well, but I love this matchup versus Green Bay. They have really struggled versus running backs so far this season. 22nd DVA versus the run, but allowing 34.5 DraftKings points per game to the position, which is the most in the league. Well over a rushing touchdown per game, nearly 100 rushing yards per game. And they're also getting killed through the air by running backs as well, with over 7 catches per game, half a receiving touchdown per game, and over 60 receiving yards per game to running backs specifically. So love the spot for Dalvin Cook. I think he can have a very, very strong game here. The volume's going to be secure with him, nearly 20 rushing attempts per game, nearly 1.5 rushing touchdowns per game, and nearly 100 rushing yards per game as well. And Alexander Mattison looked awful last time out versus Atlanta, so I think he's just going to definitely be relied upon here. So Dalvin Cook, great spot versus Green Bay. Just got to hope they keep this game close, because if they don't, they might be able to abandon the run a little bit, which is something they certainly do not want to do. But all in all, I think Dalvin Cook is an excellent play here this week. And then we'll move on to our first wide receiver, and I don't see how it can't be Davante Adams here. He is super expensive this week at $8,800. Pretty much getting last year's Michael Thomas treatment, where Michael Thomas was super expensive for a long stretch of time, but it's just because he was so consistent. But Davante Adams, he's played limited games so far this season. He missed about 3 weeks in the middle part of the year. Or, I guess technically the early portion of the year, but given the sample size we have, the middle part of the year so far. But 2 games that he was pretty healthy. Week 1 versus Minnesota, he scored 44.6 points. And then last week versus Houston, he scored 47.6. Week before that in Tampa, Aaron Rodgers was just really struggling and ended up only scoring 12.1 points. But he's had 2 absolute monster games. And that's kind of things that I wouldn't say expect from Adams. We can't expect 50 points per game from him every single week, but his floor is super safe. He's Aaron Rodgers' #1 receiver, which has always been a lucrative position to be, especially for fantasy purposes. He's also a very talented wide receiver, and he just does a really good matchup here versus Minnesota, who he already torched this season for 14 catches on 156 yards and 2 touchdowns on 17 targets for, like I mentioned earlier, 44.6 DraftKings points. I don't see they're going to have an answer for him. We should expect double-digit targets. A lot of points are going to be scored here from Green Bay, and Adams is probably going to be a good portion of that, him or Aaron Jones for the most part. And if looking at his numbers this season, 11 targets per game, over a 34% target share, over 110 receiving yards per game, 74% weighted opportunity share. And the matchup here versus Minnesota, like I said, is pretty good. They're allowing the 3rd most points per game to the position, which is 49.3 DraftKings points allowed per game, over 200 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns per game. So I know he's super pricey, but I would not be surprised if he scores another 40 fantasy points. I know it's not something we can expect or project, but it definitely would not surprise me here in a great matchup versus Minnesota. And then on the flip side of this game, I like Adam Thielen quite a bit as well. You also get about, a $1,600 discount off of Davante Adams here. It's $7,200 for Adam Thielen. Last time he played Green Bay was back in week 1. He had one of the best games of the season so far, or actually his best game of the season, where he had 34 DraftKings points on 8 targets, caught 6 of them for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. Absolutely phenomenal game from Adam Thielen. He's been one of the most consistent wide receivers this year. Outside of a 6-point game week 2 versus Indy, he hasn't scored less than 12 points, and he's also had quite a few games right around 30 fantasy points. So he's going to be heavily targeted. We know that. And this is going to be a pretty good game script for the Vikings. They are around 7-point underdogs on the road here in Green Bay. So I expect him to have to pass the ball more than they'd like to, and Adam Thielen should see quite a bit of targets here. It also helps that he's very talented as well. But like I said, I like this game a lot for fantasy purposes. I've had quite a few guys that were in this game already mentioned in the video. 54-point over-under. And if you're looking at Thielen's numbers this season, only averaging 70 receiving yards per game, but I mean, the guy's scoring over a touchdown per game, around a 30% target share, 42% market share of the team's air yards, some overall very strong numbers this season. Now, Green Bay, they aren't that bad versus the pass, and Alexander has certainly been a very, very good opposing quarterback this season. But I'm really just a fan of the game environment here, and I expect a lot of points to be scored. Adam Thielen should be in for a pretty strong game. And if you can't get all the way up to Davante Adams and you want to use a wide receiver from this game, I think Adam Thielen is a fine consolation prize at a $1,600 discount for sure. All right, and finally we move on to the tight end position, and the first guy I want to talk about is Travis KELCE at $6,600. You can make a case for George Kittle here, but I just trust Patrick Mahomes throwing the football over Jimmy Garoppolo, so that's why I sat with Travis KELCE here. And they also have a team total of 33.75 this week. A lot of points are going to be scored from the Chiefs. The problem is they're a 19-point favorite, so I could see them having to let their foot off the gas at the end of the game, or at least near it. So it just gives me a slight concern there, but I think Travis KELCE should have a pretty good bounce-back game here. Kansas City offense didn't really do too much in terms of fantasy points scored last week versus Denver, but again, 2 defensive touchdowns can certainly hinder your upside there. But assuming that doesn't happen once again, Travis KELCE, I'd expect him to have a pretty strong game here. We know he's one of Patrick Mahomes' favorite targets. If you're looking at his numbers this season, nearly 8 targets per game, a 23% target share. I mean, he doesn't really do too much in the air yards department, but I'm not really concerned about that. He's pretty much the best tight end in football, right up there with George Kittle. You can make a case for either one of them, but one of them has the best quarterback in football throwing the ball, and that would be Travis KELCE. This is also pretty much the best offense in football as well. And Jets, I mean, they suck versus the pass. They kind of just suck in all aspects, defensively or just even offensively as well. But they're 28th DVA versus the pass, and they're also below league average when it comes to tight ends, giving up nearly 14 DraftKings points per game to the position. And now they have to face Travis KELCE, so I expect a pretty strong game here from KELCE. And if you do want to stack the Chiefs, your obvious options are Patrick Mahomes, Travis KELCE, and Tyreek Hill. Mahomes is super expensive, but Tyreek Hill and Travis KELCE aren't going to break the bank expensive, because I believe Tyreek Hill's mid 6K price range, and then Travis KELCE's obviously in the mid 6K range as well. So it's not the hardest thing to do in the world. It's just paying up for $8,100 for Patrick Mahomes. You're going to have to sacrifice at some other position like running back probably and try to find a value guy. But you can get it done if you really want to stack up against the Jets for sure. And then the last guy we're going to talk about is one of my favorite plays on the slate this week. That is Darren Waller at $5,600. I'm not one to typically spend up at the tight end position, but I think you can really make a case for Darren Waller in cash games this week, because I love this Cleveland-Las Vegas game in all aspects. I like it in tournaments. I like it in cash games. There's going to be a lot of good fantasy options here. Like on the Browns side of the ball, you got Baker Mayfield, Kareem Hunt, Harrison Bryant, David Njoku, and even some of the cheaper wide receivers, Jarvis Landry, Rashad Higgins, maybe even a tournament dart throw on Donovan Peoples-Jones. Then on the Raiders side of the ball, you got Derek Carr, who's really cheap, Josh Jacobs, Darren Waller, and even some of the wide receivers like Hunter Renfrow. He's pretty cheap as well, below 4K this week. So I love this game for fantasy purposes. We got a 53.5 point over under. I believe that's what it is currently. Yeah, 53.5 and only a 2.5 point spread here. So I'm expecting a back and forth game for the most part. And both these defenses are pretty rough. And I think Darren Waller's going to have a pretty strong game here. He's one of the heaviest targeted tight ends in the league. Nearly 9 targets per game and near 30% target share, which is actually above George Kittle and Travis KELCE. And he's just going to get a ton of work here, a ton of looks. And it's a great spot versus Cleveland. They have struggled versus the tight end position so far this season. They're 25th DVA versus the pass, and they're also bottom half in the league when it comes to guarding tight ends, giving up they're actually 21st in the league versus tight ends, allowing 14.5 DraftKings points per game to the position. So Darren Waller, I think this is an elite spot for him, and I like that price tag too. It might feel a little bit expensive, but I actually think he should be above 6K. So loving the spot for Darren Waller, one of my favorite plays on this slate. And that's going to conclude today's video, guys. I hope it was helpful. If it was, make sure you leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. And with that being said, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to work on the Showdown slate video for you guys. I'll probably have that up either tonight or tomorrow morning, so be on the lookout for that. Then I'll have the mid-range plays video, the value plays video, and then later on in the week, on the weekend, we'll have the lineup building video and the core plays one as well. So I'm going to get out of here. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day.